In the 1920s, men were not the only athletes at Tufts. The women of Jackson College participated in many sports, including a freshman-sophomore game of baseball at the annual Jackson Field Day. They also competed in tennis, golf, volleyball, and horseback riding. In 1929, the Jackson women's baseball team was formed. With few women's colleges to compete with, the Jackson team was only able to play against Pembroke College of Brown University. Their first game, played in Providence, Rhode Island, was a resounding defeat for Jackson, 25-6. Things picked up, however, at the next home game, where the Jackson women trounced Brown 18-6.
I wish to thank President DiBiagio and the university, Rocky Cazzo and the athletic department, the members of the Bass family, and all of the former captains whose generosity made this dedication of the Captain's Gate at the Ellis Oval a reality.
Fish Ellis's future wife, Dory Laughlin, was a member of the Jackson baseball team. She wrote, "I recall a game against Pembroke at Tufts, at which several of the football players wandered over after practice to give us support. As to the score of this game, my memory does me no favors. However, I have one recollection of a very sore, bone-bruised hand, even though I stuffed a bulky handkerchief in my shortstop mitt to soften the impact of a line drive." Despite the players' interests in the sport, women's baseball was disbanded in the 1930s. The 1930s brought the Great Depression to America.
This great nation will endure as it has endured, will revive and will prosper.
While most schools had to tighten their belts, Tufts, surprisingly, increased spending on athletics. The decade saw the introduction of lacrosse as a varsity sport and the formal recognition of soccer in 1934. In 1939, the Tufts Mountain Club was founded to allow students the experience of outdoor sports year-round. A lodge was purchased in northern New Hampshire, and a yearly membership of $3 gave students access to its facilities. In order to accommodate Jackson students, a female chaperone was hired to be at the lodge on the first and third weekend of every year. But it was an upgrade in the facilities that transformed the landscape of athletics at Tufts. In 1931, ground was broken on what was to become known as Cousins Gym. The previous Goddard Gymnasium had become too small for the growing student body, and then President John Cousins, an alumnus and former Tufts football player, realized that the financial burden of building a new gym was a necessity. He managed to raise the funds to construct what was to date the most expensive building on campus. The new gym provided a large baseball cage, basketball courts, an indoor track, and locker and shower facilities. The built-in bleachers provided seating for 500 people. The cost? More than $500,000. Upon completion, it was recognized as the best indoor facility in the greater Boston area.
This is one of the proudest moments of my life. The Lord giveth, and the Lord taketh away. The Lord gave us Eddie Duggar, but He will never take him away, because we are placing a permanent, everlasting tribute to Eddie Duggar on this campus this morning.
The start of the 1940s promised to be a great era in sports at Tufts. It also gave Tufts one of its most memorable athletes. He was a local boy, born and raised in West Medford, and when he ran, Edward Eddie Duggar was, as the local newspaper reported, one of the fastest running prospects ever to come out of the hills of New England.
Eddie would be so proud of everybody being his friends here, because he was, as someone said, he was a very modest person, but he just loved Tufts. Tufts was a family that, whenever he traveled with a track team, no matter what part of the country it was, the thing of it was that he took the track team, were his best friends.
Often referred to as a one-man track team, Duggar broke records wherever he competed. In June 1940, he won the NCAA track and field 120-yard high hurdles championship in a time of 13.9 seconds, setting an American and NCAA record. He was the National Collegiate High Hurdles champion and the New England intercollegiate champion in 100-yard dash, the 220, the 220 low hurdles, and the broad jump. Many of his records went unbroken for years, and was the first black student in Tufts history to be made a member of the Sophomore Honor Society, Sword and Shield.
There have been many times in my life when the odds were heavily against me, and I felt nearly overwhelmed by the prospect of failure. It has been at this moment that I summoned my father, whether he was living or dead, and said to him, "Will you run this one with me?" And he has. And with him by my side, we have beaten the odds and laughed the laugh the runners laugh when they know their victory is not theirs, is not their own.
Had World War II not intervened, Duggar, by all accounts, was headed for Olympic glory. At first, America stayed out of the conflict in Europe, watching from the sidelines as Hitler's army marched across the continent and dropped bombs on America's allies.
The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked.
But when it became apparent that the country was going to have to enter the war, then President Leonard Carmichael, aiming to serve the total war effort of our nation as effectively as possible, as he put it, petitioned the Navy for an ROTC unit and got one, becoming just one of 8 colleges to do so. What became known as the V-12 program helped to keep the university afloat during the war and brought record numbers of people to campus. It also led to a decline in sports at the college, with the entire student body devoted to the war effort. The oval and the tennis courts were taken over by units for practice, while other grounds were used to plant victory gardens. Part of Cousins Gym became headquarters for the V-12 program, and until Curtis Hall was converted into a dining room, the baseball cage served as a temporary mess hall for the Navy. Although some games were played here and there, they were primarily games between students and servicemen. In the words of Harriet Gaffney Palmieri, class of 1945, the Jackson Athletic Association arranged a field hockey game with some sailors from the British Royal Navy. To our astonishment, it was an all-male team. Our team, captained by Maxine Liebeck, made a valiant effort, but the Englishmen won 3-1. Full intercollegiate sports would have to wait until the war was over. Athletics returned to Tufts after the war with a vengeance. In 1945, the lacrosse team won the New England Championship, and the track team won at the New England Track and Field Games for the first time in 50 years. During the 1949-1950 school year, the baseball team was chosen to represent New England at the National Collegiate Athletic Association. Although they didn't win, they took satisfaction in knowing that they were the team with the smallest school in student body size to compete. That same year, the basketball team posted a 19-4 record and were thought by many to be the best in New England. Some Tufts athletes went on to set records after graduation. Ted Vogel, class of 1949, placed 3rd in the Boston Marathon in 1947 and ran in the 1948 Summer Olympics. Another track team member, Bob Backus, class of 51, competed in the 1952 Olympics in Helsinki, placing 13th in the 16-pound hammer throw. But of all the athletes to play at Tufts after the war, the unquestionable star was Rudolph Rudy Folbert, class of 1950. Fish Ellis, who was Folbert's coach, said that Folbert deserved the title of the greatest Tufts athlete. Folbert was not a one-sport player. On a typical day, he would play outfield for the baseball team and then jump and sprint for the track team. He would go on to earn 12 varsity letters, 4 each in football, baseball, and track. After graduation, Folbert remained dedicated to Tufts, becoming a trustee and chairman of the Alumni Council. He is remembered today with the Rudolph J. Folbert Award, given to the male and female multi-sports athletes with good academic averages and potential for leadership.
1, 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, rock. 5, 6, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, rock. 9, 10, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, rock. We're gonna rock around the clock tonight. Put your glad rags on.
The prosperity of post-war America was reflected at Tufts with high enrollments and more than 20 different sports in which to compete, including hockey, which became a varsity sport in 1957. The 1950s would become one of the strongest decades for jumbo sports, with no less than 6 NCAA championships from baseball to track. In 1957, Tufts won a trophy from the New England Intercollegiate Ski Conference, while a varsity baseball team won the Greater Boston League title. The year before, the indoor track team went undefeated, and the 1-mile relay team won the New England Championship. The one team that seemed to have trouble was football. The 1951-52 team had their worst season in 65 years, including a 60-0 loss at the hands of the University of New Hampshire.
The long and winding road.
Ask not what your country can do.
But football rebounded, and in 1960, the team posted a 7-1 record for the year. Yet, as the new decade progressed, the atmosphere on campus changed. Students were now interested in more than just parties and games. Activism hit the college, and with it came anti-war protests and demonstrations.
Help! I need somebody help!
The result was a decline in interest in sports. Yet the dedicated athletes prevailed. The 1966-67 cross-country and indoor track teams were undefeated, and the 1967 men's soccer team enjoyed one of its best seasons ever, winning both the New England College Division Championships and the Greater Boston Championships. In 1965, sailing became an intramural sport at Tufts, and the team, who called the Mystic Lake their home, promptly defeated 34 others and tied for 4th place. Since 1976, they have won 22 national collegiate championships, and many of its members have gone on to win national championships. In 1968, the baseball team won the Greater Boston League Championship with the help of a pitcher, Bill Richardson, Jr., class of 1970.
Ladies and gentlemen, I call upon Dr. Sam Smith to present the NCAA Theodore Roosevelt Award to Bill Richardson, Secretary of the United States Department of Energy.
Although he received offers to turn pro, Richardson decided to take a different route. He would go on to become a congressman, ambassador to the UN, Secretary of Energy under President Clinton, and Governor of New Mexico.
To leave office before my term is completed is abhorrent to every instinct in my body. But as president, I must put the interests of America first.
In the day we sweated out on the streets of a runaway American dream.
The 1970s saw a return to sports on campus, but in a different form than before, this time with more participants than spectators. But lack of attendance didn't distract the players. The decade was dominated by soccer, track, and sailing. In 1972, the soccer team was named New England champions, and the track team the winners of the Eastern Indoor Championship. The National Sailing magazine named Tufts Sailing Team the best in the country, and the football team again proved its worth. In 1979, quarterbacked by All-American Chris Connors, class of 1980, the team posted the third and last undefeated season at Tufts.